Yeah.
Shall I start?
Yeah.
Hi everybody, thank you so much for joining us. We're pre-recording this session and it's one of our webinars to share information around autism through this month. And I'm really delighted to say that a colleague of ours, Colin from Midland Lancs CSU, is joining us to share his story. And it has some quite interesting aspects to it and quite unusual aspects, which I think he'll share with us. And some of you may be surprised by some of the things he says. If you, obviously because we're doing this pre-recorded, we can't have a Q&A, but if you would like to send me any questions, then I can forward them on to Colin and then we can get them back to you. So enjoy the session, listen to what Colin has to say, and at the end of it, perhaps think about how we can all be better allies around people with autism and how we can be inclusive and supportive in our workplaces. Okay, enjoy. Colin, over to you.
Hi. Yeah, as Anthony said, I work for Midlands and Lancs CSU. I've been within the NHS now for the last 20 years, but I was only diagnosed as being autistic in May last year. So I'm not even 1 year old as a autistic person. That was quite a trip for me, and starting off with the Chris Packham documentary about 4 or 5 years ago, which my wife asked me to watch, since she'd picked up on some of my behaviours and how I was presenting myself, and she asked that I watch the documentary. And I'm not Chris Packham, and his version of autism, for want of a better word, is not mine. So the lived experience is completely different, but there were parallels in what he did, what he said, how he lived his life. And it got me thinking, and after 3 years of procrastination, I finally, with a lot of cajoling from my wife, finally went and got my diagnosis, which meant going to the GP, answering some questions to see whether I could be sent to the diagnostic team if I met the score. And then I met the score, and so within about 5 or 6 months I was diagnosed, and that started a whole lot of other things, really. I guess, Anthony, what would you like to ask about that, really?
Well, so I think that's really intriguing, isn't it, that you got to that far through your life till last May before you were diagnosed. So tell us a bit about how autism presents for you, and kind of how you, because through that life experience prior to that, you must have had some coping strategies that you used, maybe without even realizing what they were. But tell us a bit about how it presents for you.
Well, the vast majority of people probably wouldn't even realise unless they knew me really, really well. To actually identify coping strategies is really, really difficult. The subject of autistic masking is absolutely massive, and it's a survival mechanism. If I put to you that I wanted to be mind-numbingly average, to get through life without being noticed, without being picked up, so that I could escape criticism, bullying, being sidelined, and all the things that I possibly went through when I was younger. When I left high school, I knew enough to keep myself out of the limelight, but realised I had to do enough to keep myself from being picked up as being a loner. So I had to socialise, but I didn't want to socialise too much. So, and this is unconscious. I didn't realise until I started pulling it all apart and trying to work out my life experience. I couldn't even isolate the particular occasions that caused me to start masking. You know, they happened so deep in childhood. But if I was to go to the pub, I could indulge people in a conversation and talk about all manner of different subjects. It would tire me out a lot quicker. if I was not having a drink, I'd probably last about an hour and a half, and then I'd have to leave. I'd be absolutely exhausted. And it wouldn't present in tiredness, it would present in frustration and anxiety. So it's very much about trying to make sure that I give myself the time off once to get away from those social experiences. And as an aside, I walked past the pub yesterday. I had to go into Macclesfield, and I walked past the pub, and the beer garden was open, and I didn't realise actually how jarring lots of conversation going on at once was, because I got used to not having it. I didn't realise actually just how not sort of disorientating or even a little painful that it was, and how that pushed my stress levels up through the roof. And I never noticed that until being isolated from it through lockdown.
So do you think, so a couple of things I wanted to ask you, but we'll just pick up on that first. So do you think then that being in isolation through COVID, has that exacerbated some of those reactions in you, do you think?
I don't know about that. Lockdown for me wasn't that hard. In some ways, and in other ways it was. There's some things I miss. There's a chap who I follow online who mentioned that they miss going for a coffee, and I can see that, because it's nice to go into town and just go and get coffee and watch the world going by, and that got levels of more difficult. But the idea of going to a shop and it wasn't being that busy, say Sainsbury's, and actually being able to get around without all the normal noise that was in there, especially earlier on when they were limiting the amount of people who could go in, made shopping a lot easier. So yeah, it did impact on my mental health, but in some ways, but in other ways it actually made things easier. It also, I think, made things in general easier for sorry, been talking for quite a while today. For anyone with disability, simply because accommodations were being made that some disabled people have been making for years and not been able to get, simply because the opening up working from home. Although, funnily enough, I did struggle with that to start off with, because home is where I live and have fun and relax, and the office is where I go to work. And the working Colin couldn't cope with the blurring of the borders, so it made it very, very difficult for me to be productive. So that it's like anything, it was different for everybody, wasn't it? Lockdown.
But isn't that interesting? Because lots of people, well, not lots of people, some people have said that to me, and I'm not saying they've said it to me because they're autistic, but the sense I get from you is that your experience of autism puts some of those things under a microscope and amplifies them.
That would be fair to say, yeah.
So when you were in a position like we all were, of having to our living space and our working space being the same, what kinds of things did you do to make that feel more comfortable for you?
I couldn't. I actually petitioned to go back into the office as a reasonable adjustment.
Okay, but did that mean you had to explain? I mean, I don't know whether you are open at work about your situation. Did it force you to kind of say things you might not say previously?
I disclosed to my manager just before I got diagnosed, for about a month or so, because I was going through that process and didn't know what it was going to look like. And I was already from that point working from home because of lockdown. I mean, that was April, and we're still being advised to work from home now, and I'm all right with that now. But at the time, I was struggling with lots of other things, and actually, when I went into the office, it didn't make much of a difference, except I knew I was at work, as opposed to all the nice things that I'm used to doing at home, or staring at me going, I'm more interesting than this. So
when you spoke to your manager then, do you think he got it? He or she got it? Did they understand, or did you have to go into quite a lot of detail about the impact it was having on you, or do you think they got it?
She got it, yeah, definitely. I mean, my manager has been very supportive. To be fair, I mean, I've not had any bad experiences from a point of view of how I've been accepted post diagnosis. Because I'm still, I mean, it took a while to get my head around it, but I'm still the same Colin.
So you mentioned earlier about, you mentioned masking. So I want to ask you a little bit about that, because when we use masking normally, it's about something to hide behind, isn't it? Yeah. So to pretend to be somebody else and to hide behind what we're really showing, feeling and wanting to be perceived as.
Yes.
Does that also make sense in how you're describing it? Is that how you're using it?
Absolutely. There are behaviours and traits that are associated with being autistic. Stimming, for instance. So you don't know this, but I'm doing it at the moment. You just can't see what my hands are doing. Yeah, they're off camera, but my fingers are moving all the time. You know, they're just they're here. They're not, but they're not. But if I'm having a conversation with someone, I'll probably find myself folding my arms and looking very formal. Actually, I just don't know what to do with my hands. And eye contact for me isn't painful, but it is difficult to do. So I'm having a conversation with somebody and I'm doing eye contact, and that's fine to start off with, and then I'll start focusing on that, going, do I need to blink now? Can I glance away? Do I look back? Am I over staring? Am I you know, am I getting to the point where I need, you know, and it's all that sort of stuff. And at that point, I am no longer paying attention to the conversation. I am more trying to blend in with the environment that I'm in. And I could lose about 5 minutes of conversation because I'm just, my mouth's open and going, yeah, and my eyes are doing stuff, but I am controlling that. It's not a natural. You're muted, Anthony.
I say the best things when I'm muted. It's amazing. Well, I think what I'm hearing you say is that the effort you put into those things, to, as you describe it, masking, does that affect how you can concentrate on what else is going on around you then?
Yes, it can sometimes, but typically the cost is later on in the day. So it takes a lot of effort, and I didn't even realise. I just assumed that it was everybody went through that. You know, it was like get home and be a bit ratty maybe, or just want to indulge in a hobby or something. And it was the other thing, actually, trying to work out why was I having problems with things other people didn't seem to have problems with. So there's always that feeling of feeling God out of place. Slightly out of sync with the rest of reality to a certain degree, and with that comes a certain amount of loneliness. And even when you're in quite close confines with like with family and things like that, you just have to say one thing and suddenly it's like, oh, why the hell did I say that? That level of honesty wasn't really required at that moment in time, or why did I snap and say that? And it was basically because I was probably very tired and was losing that ability to mask.
So you mentioned when we spoke, because we had a chat offline, didn't we, first, to get to know each other a bit, and you told me that you'd had some time recently off sick. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that and how that links?
Yeah, so as you get older, I mean, I'm 47 now, and you just have less energy, don't you? The reserves aren't there. And when you spent your entire life masking, it's not really officially a thing in so much that I don't believe that anyone's scientifically proven it. But you might hear an autistic person say, I've had autistic burnout. And I would say that through my life, I've had now probably 2, maybe 3. And that is where you just, the glass is full and it's overflowing, and it continues to overflow. And that can be a combination of many things. It could be lots and lots of masking going on and trying to compensate for it. With me, it was pressures at work, pressures at home, exasperated by finding out that I was officially autistic. And that led to me taking nearly 6 months off work. So if I had anxiety then and I have anxiety now, I've had it my entire life. And what I realized was I was actually, and had been probably most of my adult life, fighting depression. I had depression and I thought I could beat it, and I couldn't. And it wasn't possible, not following the rules of engagement that I was trying to follow. It was never going to work. And going back to school and the lack of support I had at school, I know now, led me to a point where I was not going to ask anybody for help. So I might turn around to you and say, can you help me fold this tablecloth, for instance? Not a problem. But Anthony, I need a help with this really, really major thing. I was never going to ask that question. And it took me 6 months to try and climb out of that hole, and I'm still climbing up it, but I'm far more optimistic than I was, say, before Christmas or in January. Shattering.
So, absolutely. But I guess in some ways then, having a diagnosis that late on, I'm going to use the word late in inverted commas, but when you're perhaps 2/3 of the way through your life and certainly halfway through your working life, it must be distressing, but does it also help you make sense of some things? And does it kind of give you a lens perhaps to view things through?
It does. I mean, the best way, I think that one of the best, there's a couple of ways I can coin it. Is that I am an autistic, what will probably class as an autistic elder, but I've got L plates. The other thing is, and I put this in a blog article for work, and that is that being autistic and not knowing it is like trying to build a car, and everybody's building a rally car and everyone's got instructions for building the rally car, but the bits I've got are for a Formula 1 racing car, and the instructions I've got are for the rally car, and I'm trying to put that car together with a set of instructions that aren't built for a Formula 1 racing car. So I'm struggling. And I probably won't ever be able to build that car, because although it's got 4 wheels and it's got a steering wheel or steering mechanism, it's got brakes, accelerator, and engine, and all those sort of things, they're built in different ways. And my frame of reference is everybody else's life, not how my brain is wired to govern mine. But the funny thing is that actually the Formula 1 racing car might be required, but the rest of everybody else doesn't know that. So it's just a case of allowing me to have the right set of instructions to build the correct car. And I know that goes a little bit off subject, but that's probably the best way I can frame me transitioning from a person who is neurotypical, who wasn't, to a person who is autistic and knowing it. And masking is basically the wrong instruction, is working to the wrong instruction book. So you're trying to do something with a set of instructions that you have to constantly amend to make them work for you in life. And at some point it will probably fail unless you can do something about it. And that's where diagnosis can be a problem.
So when we talked earlier, you said that one of your frustrations was that how we typically talk about autism is in a deficit model.
Yeah.
Tell us a bit about what you mean by that.
Okay. So the model for diagnosis is to look at the deficits and how they're impacting on you as an individual. So if I was living a life that had all the accommodations necessary, it's very likely that I would never get a diagnosis. And the medical profession might even turn around and say, well, it's not required, you're not struggling. And the danger is, if you don't appear to be, are you not struggling, or do you appear to not be struggling? Because I might be struggling, but you don't see it, because I'm very good at stopping you from seeing that. So where is that? Now, it gets to the point where I can't cover it up anymore. You start seeing the negative traits as life starts to fall apart to a certain degree, and then you get a diagnosis. And it has been known that some people have actually been refused diagnosis because, well, you're not struggling at the moment, so you don't need it. There's no value in it. Well, being autistic is part of my identity. It's how my brain's wired. So personally, I would want to know. I want that diagnosis because I might not be struggling now, but in 10 years' time, I might. And then I'm in a position to strategize and I can plan. And that's one of the principal issues, I think, around it. And you're reminded, you go look back in your life at all the deficit behavior or the things that went wrong or the things that are odd with the rest of society to get your diagnosis, which means opening a lot of bad memories that you might not want to revisit. So, and there is some funny stuff too. It's not all bad, but the vast majority of stuff is why did I do this? Why did I do that? And I buried it. It had gone. Right? Things that happened at school or early on in my working life, I'm trying to forget. I've moved on from it, and suddenly I'm being asked to remember it. I'm being asked to remember anything that stood out. Why was I so desperate back then, and so sometimes really unhappy, and you've got to go through that and remember it.
So some of those memories are going to be really tough. Just did you get any support or counselling after those assessments? Because that sounds like it's taken the lid off quite a lot of big stuff.
It does, and you kind of it's a postcode lottery. So it depends on which CCG is providing the funding. Now, I've got to be honest, in Cheshire, I was very lucky in that I got the diagnostic service really quick. But when it came to the end of that, it was, sorry, well, we could signpost you to the Samaritans if you're feeling down, or the emergency mental health, or you can go and look at these 2 or 3 charities, and there are these hubs that you can go and associate it with. Or you could look at CBT. But what struck me was that there isn't actually a bespoke service for helping autistic people once they've been diagnosed. And it's kind of like, well, you're an adult and you've been living up till now. You've got your autism diagnosis. That's going to help, right? Well, your life's imploding as you still having to process what happened in 1988. You know. Oh. So, and also work, and also manage your life and family, and try and maintain those relationships. So, diagnosis was validating for me in some ways, but in other ways, it just opened a Pandora's box that I could not shut. Listened to a lot of late 80s pop for about 2 or 3 months. It was horrible. No, joking aside, it wasn't very nice at all. It was horrible. Yeah. No, that's really difficult. So do you think so I guess then, so thinking about this, so obviously the purpose of these webinars is to help us understand more about the breadth of the subject and how it impacts on the people that work with us and work for us. Then as an employing organisation, what are kinds of some of the things that we could do, that we could be better at to support people in your situation, do you think? I think in the first instance, what I'll say is that the MLC issue, from a point of view of my management team, have been very, very good and very supportive. But I think there is a genuine lack of knowledge about how to deal with it. So some of the processes and the paperwork, I would say, aren't necessarily suitable, and aren't necessarily accessible either. So my boss tried to get me, sat with me and tried to fill in a stress risk assessment, and I found it very difficult. And it's framed, I think, if stress is caused by stress, depression and anxiety, it can be removed by taking the things that are causing it away, essentially. I think there's I can't remember where the story comes from. I think it might be China or somewhere, but basically it's a rice farmer who he's desperately unhappy, and the rest of the village don't know what's going on, and somebody else turns up and they say, what do we do with this man? He just doesn't perform. He mopes about. He's really unhappy all the time. And what they said, what the stranger said was, give the man a cow. So they thought that was a bit odd, but they gave him a cow anyway, and the man tended to the cow. He looked after the cow. He made sure the cow was producing for the village in terms of milk and maybe drawing a plough and other things. But he was happy. He wasn't happy being a rice farmer, but he was happy with animal husbandry. That's what he liked. You can't do that with autism. It's there. So the idea of what we can do in the way of a form of accommodation to mitigate stress, like, well, try not to work that person so hard. They're obviously getting tired through work. When you've got other things going on in your life, say, for instance, that small thing called being autistic, the forms don't seem to marry up with what they're trying to achieve from the point of view of me as an autistic adult. So we're trying to go through that process at the moment and trying to find out what works. So there's a few occupational health referrals later. Hopefully I managed to get that. We'll get that one nailed. But at the same time, my manager is being really helpful trying to get any accommodations. The difficulty is, as an autistic person, knowing what those accommodations actually are.
No, absolutely, because everybody is different and you won't necessarily know until you try them.
Exactly.
Now, just something. So I notice you call yourself an autistic person. Yeah. Not a person with autism. So you're putting the issue before the person, and I just wondered what your thinking was on that, or am I just overthinking it?
No, that's okay. It's fine. All right. Okay, fine. Here, have my autism. No. Person with autism. There's a graphic somewhere. I should have had it handy. I haven't. I do apologise for that. But it shows someone with a person with autism holding a bag with the autism in the bag, like that. It also says suffering from autism, and it shows somebody with an autism dagger sticking them in the arm. But autistic person defines me. It shows that my brain is wired in a different way. Not better, not worse, just different. It's not going to be cured. It can't be taken away from me. I don't want it to be taken away from me. I'm actually coming to terms with being autistic. And I know that my success within the NHS hasn't been despite being autistic, but more than likely because I am autistic.
Because of the racing car you built?
Absolutely. It's only got one gear and it goes backwards faster than it goes forward, but hey.
I hope you didn't mind me asking that. It's just that we hear it, in the EDI world, people use different language. I generally put the person before the condition first. Some people don't. I was just interested on your view because it's your space, not mine, and I'm interested how you describe it.
I think the key is to ask the person first, or if you say it and they correct you, to respect that choice. If I bump into someone who's autistic and they say I'm a person with autism, so what? That's how they choose to identify their relationship with autism. It might not be as positive as mine, It might be, but that's just how they're used to it. There are people, there are autistic people who will still refer to themselves with Asperger's, even though from a diagnostic point of view, that's getting less and less. I think there are still diagnostic teams in the country that will diagnose Asperger's, but Hans Asperger's and his relationship with the Nazis, that's a that's a hole we won't go into today, I think.
So we're coming to the end of our chat, but I wanted just to ask you kind of one more thing. So how can we be, as your colleagues in the NHS, how can we be better allies around you and other people with autism? What can we do differently, if anything?
It's got to be involvement. Everybody has to be involved. Me as an autistic person, you as an ally. What I've seen of other people's experiences in the UK and elsewhere, for that matter, is that people come up with a great idea and say this will help, but they don't actually consult with the people, the subject matter. That could be a panel of male board members talking about female rights, for instance, within the business, to make sure, trying to be more accommodating, or a panel of looking at disability, but not having disabled people on the panel. It's like what you think is best for me may not be best for me. Not all. I think very few autistic people actually have learning difficulties to the point where you could actually argue what are learning difficulties anyway, because sometimes it's just a lack of accommodations that stop an individual from learning, which is my experience.
Yeah, you might just learn in a different way.
Yeah. So, but also, you've also got to take into account other associated conditions. So, for instance, I haven't been diagnosed yet, but I'm fairly confident that I'm ADHD, which is a right mix-up with autism, because autism says I want to be structured and I make sure that everything's okay, and my ADHD brain is going, yeah, but what will happen if I jump out of that window? An extreme point of view, but that was the thing. And a conversation I had with a counsellor a few weeks ago was the fact that actually autistic people, ADHD, OCD, all those other, we evolve with humanity. These little changes and differences in the human brain, and they were there for a reason. And it's likely that the autistic hunter-gatherers were on watch, hyper vigilant, hyper alert, focusing on changes and patterns in the environment to make sure the tribe was safe. And the ADHD brained people, they were experimenting and trailblazing and doing the stuff, and they climb up the tree and fall out the tree. Well, we won't do that again, because the ADHD just proved it was a stupid thing to do because of that impulsivity. So what's happened is society's moved on, and we've been a part of that. We're not going to push autism onto other people in history, but we're there in history and helping the development of the human race to how it is today. But we've also made the world very difficult for us to live in. And I don't think the human mind has evolved at the speed of our development as a people.
I'm going to have to draw this to a close there, but I wanted just to thank you for being so honest, because I've learned a lot from that, and I hope other people will as well. And I'm really grateful to you for your honesty and your time and your transparency, because you've talked about some things that are deeply personal there, and I'm really grateful that you have. And I know that other people that listen to this will be really grateful.
I'm sorry if I'm meandered a bit.
No, not at all. We are going to post this on our EDI website in the same way as we do all of our other learning webinars. Sure. And I will reach out to you also to support us if you're able with joining our EDI forum that we're establishing for the Northwest, because we want that to be as absolutely representative as possible.
That would be fantastic.
I also did just want to tell you something we're doing. So we are really campaigning to try and make our ESR system representative. There is no way currently that you, as an autistic person, could identify yourself as neurodiverse on ESR. Right. And that's a real problem because we don't know how many people we're working with.
Sure.
So I think that would be really, really important. If we can get that done, we would really be far more accurate about understanding the real makeup of our workforce, and that has to be really important.
Absolutely, and I think that's one of the things that I mean, I work for an organisation with around about 2,500 people in it, and I don't really know of anybody else who was actually disclosed being autistic. Certainly to the level I have, anyway, because I'm not hiding it anymore. But you do wonder in the stats say 1 to 1 in 1.5 people in 100 are autistic, and those figures are out of date, probably not accurate. So there's in an organisation of there's 30 or 40 of us certainly within the organisation,
sure.
And that's going to be multiplied across the entire NHS, surely.
It's a lot of, and if you describe it as racing car builders, that's a lot of untapped talent, isn't it?
I'd say so. Yeah. Untapped talent, and there are people out there that haven't got a job. We are the lowest proportion of disabled people that are in work, at about 16% of autistic individuals. Although that figure is again a little out of date, but yeah, something like 16% are in work, and I think an even smaller percent are actually in full-time work.
That's a startling statistic, that, isn't it? All the positive things that we've heard you describe about how people think and act and can deliver, that's frightening. That's untapped talent.
Yeah.
Colin, I have to end it there. I'm really sorry. It's been really enjoyed talking to you, and thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
You take care of yourself, stay safe, and we'll talk again soon.
Will do. Look forward to it. Thank you. Bye.